Welcome to this video on inductors. Specifically, we're going to be looking at LC circuits, which are inductor capacitor circuits. Basically, these are electrical oscillators. So we're going to see a similar motion to a pendulum or to a spring with a mass oscillating back and forth. And so one way to look at it in this image that we have here is the energy in the electric field of the capacitor is going to be bounced back and forth between the energy in the magnetic field of the inductor. Now I'm going to be using a FET simulator here. There's a link in the description below to their awesome AC/DC circuit construction kit simulator, so check that out. Now the way that I've set it up here, it looks a little more complicated than it really needs to be, because all I've done here is put a switch in so that I can charge up the capacitor, then I can open it up and we don't need to worry about this anymore. So let's go ahead and take a look at what should happen. So I'll connect it. We saw a flame there. That was just because I have no resistance. So keeping in mind here that we're bringing the resistivity of the wires to 0, and we can always add that back in if we need to. So let's go ahead and take a look here at what we expect to happen. So we have a positive charge on the top capacitor plate and therefore a negative on the bottom capacitor plate, which is what we'd expect based on the orientation of this battery's connection to the capacitor. And now when I close S2, switch 2, I have a series configuration between this capacitor and this inductor. Now we know that what a capacitor will do once there's a conducting path connected across it, we should see the initial charge value. If we're looking at charge as a function of time, we should see a drop off towards 0. And we've looked at this before in just an RC circuit. In this case over here, however, because we know that inductors have a different kind of response to if this was a resistor. So we should think about this. As soon as we close this switch, we know that that increase in current, or the sudden amount of current, is going to cause a back EMF in the inductor. So it's going to try to prevent that increase in current, and it will start to try to pull it down. And so let's just watch what happens here. So we close this, we see the increase in current, and the increase hits 0.4. But we do definitely see, as it swings back up to this 0.4, that the rate of change is decreasing. So anytime we think about a rate of change that is not constant, we can consider the fact that it could have something to do with the differential equation. So go ahead and open the switch again. We also saw that the plates were switching charge sign, so the top is now negative, and that happened several times as we watched this go. So let's just graph what the charge is as a function of time. And what we saw happen was that there was a maximum positive charge to begin with. At some point there was no charge on the plates, and we can run this through and just pause it at that point. But if you watch, there comes a time right there in the middle where there was no charge. And then the charge on the top plate is now the negative maximum value of charge, and so on. And it will oscillate back and forth. Now, all I'm doing here right now is noting what is happening, but we haven't really looked at why that's happening yet. So if I go ahead and sketch in this function, what I have here is a cosine graph, and these should have equal amplitudes, which they're a little off, but close enough. So what I'm seeing here is not the continual drop off, but it actually goes back up again to another maximum value on the other side. Now this function, we can write out a generic form for it, so we know it's a charge as a function of time, and it's equal to some, I'm just going to call this Q naught. This is the amplitude value times the cosine of omega t. And I'm not going to put in any of the other constants, but omega, if you remember, is going to be the angular frequency. And the angular frequency, for lack of a better description, describes how some physical parameters affect how often a full 2 pi cycle will occur. Okay, so it's some sort of physical fix on how quickly this will oscillate. Okay, so we have that function. Now we want to take a look at what was happening with the current, which was kind of interesting. So we know that the current in the the capacitor will usually start at a maximum value and drop off. Now what we knew happened was that the current was trying to increase, and the inductor was creating a back EMF and trying to prevent that increase. So we would expect to see through the inductor something that looked like this. So it's trying to reach a steady state in the circuit, and the inductor is kind of pushing back at it. Well, we know that as the charge evens out between the two plates, that's going to cause the current to start to drop. And we know that inductors will oftentimes prevent something from dropping because they will prevent the flux change. So let's just think about that series of events very quickly here in terms of the inductor. Well, when you first close the switch, the current is going from 0 to something, so that's increased. The magnetic field through that solenoid has increased according to our solenoid equation. That's one of them. Therefore, the flux is going to increase because the B has increased, and we know that magnetic flux will increase directly with the magnetic field. And because of that, it's going to create that back EMF. So it's going to try to push against this positive side. Okay, so we'll try to match that polarity. Well, at that point, as soon as the current starts to drop again because of this charge, there's no charge difference between the two plates, we should see that the opposite will happen. The current will drop, the magnetic field through the solenoid will drop. That means the flux will drop, and when the flux drops, we know that it's going to try to prevent the drop, so it's going to push in the same direction, and it's going to cause that kind of pull in the opposite direction. Now we know that dq dt, the derivative, the time derivative of charge, is going to give us the current as a function of time. So what we can do is look at this graph here, and I should label this one as q of t. And now what I'm going to do is try to get the current function on this graph. So we know that any maximum values or minimum values are going to be 0 values for the derivative, and any negative here maximum slope value is going to give me my negative amplitude of the new graph. Here my positive amplitude of the new graph, and my negative amplitude of this graph. Now if I connect these dots, we see we have a sine function here, and particularly it's a negative sine function. And it's exactly 90 degrees out of phase with the other one that was there. So I'm going to label this one I of t, since that's what this line represents. And we can see that that is happening exactly what we thought should happen. The current is trying to increase, so it's going away from 0, and then we see that it starts to decrease, and the inductor is going to prevent the decrease, so it starts to increase again. Now we've got this opposite poles start to form with the capacitor, and the same cycle will occur again and again and again. So let's go ahead here and take a look at the actual function so that we can figure out what about this physical situation is causing the angular frequency, or what in the angular frequency is causing this cycle to happen faster or less frequently. So if I take the derivative of this actual function here, so not just theoretically, but actually take the derivative of this, what we should find is, I'm going to write these all in terms of q of t, so q prime t is going to be equal to negative omega q naught times sine of omega t. I'm going to go ahead and take another derivative, so the second derivative of q with respect to time, and I'm going to get negative omega squared q naught times cosine of omega t. Okay, so I've got these all lined up here. Now what I know is that this first derivative should be the current. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'll actually think about this as I naught. So that's the current amplitude. That is omega times Q naught. Okay. Now, we established that this is going to be some sort of a differential equation. And the reason for that is because we have charge dependent on time and current dependent on time and dependent on charge and dependent on potential difference. And so there's multiple things. So let's write Faraday's law here, negative L di dt, to describe the back EMF or the EMF across the inductor. And we know that the EMF across the capacitor is equal to Q over C. So I'll set these equal to one another. Now what some people do is they actually try to write a loop rule for this statement, and you can do it essentially, but really with the inductor it should rather be using the statement of Faraday's law basically. Okay, so what's going to happen here is we can actually move this L, negative L over here. So I'm going to end up with di dt is equal to Q over negative LC. At this point, we can see how there's a differential equation. We know that we have this function Q of t, so it's not a fixed value. This function Q of t and di dt are related. Well, we know I of t is dq dt, but di dt is dq, the second derivative, we'll say that. So let's go ahead and write that in this form. So I'm going to go back up over here. So di dt is the same thing as d squared q dt squared, which is what I was trying to say before, and that equals q of t over negative LC. So essentially what we have here is a second derivative of q with respect to time is equal to some constant, negative 1 over LC, times q of t. Okay, now we knew what q of t was. That was this function over here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually substitute that in. So this will be negative 1 over LC is equal to, or times, q naught times the cosine of omega t. On this side, I need to have the second derivative of q with respect to time. So that is going to give me omega squared, well, negative omega squared times q naught times cosine omega t. Okay, and that came just from here, the second derivative. Okay, so at this point what we see here is we have a q naught cosine omega t on both sides here. I'm going to actually factor out that function and have negative omega squared is equal to negative 1 over LC. So the negative can factor out, and we see here that omega is equal to, if I take the square root of both sides, 1 over root LC. And that's how we get the angular frequency of an LC circuit. So basically what it's telling me here is that L and C are what affect how long or how often a cycle occurs. So if we have a larger capacitance value, and if we have a larger inductance value, and remember those values are determined from the geometric and the material composition of those circuit components, you can see here that that's going to affect the angular frequency. If we wanted to convert the angular frequency into just a regular old frequency here, we could do this, right? And so we could actually calculate how much of the frequency in terms of hertz, or how many cycles occur every second, that would allow us to do that. This is pretty theoretical and can be a little bit daunting for people, but it's actually a very useful skill to be able to analyze this, because in a circuit, if you were designing a circuit and you hooked it up to an oscilloscope, you'd be able to see places where there may be some noise in your current as a function of time, or other values that you could look at. And you can figure out how to filter them out using different combinations of inductors and so forth.